Good afternoon. Hello, my name is Sandra Nicholson and I'm chair of ASME. For those who haven't seen any of the ASME Bite-Size initiatives yet, this is our fifth one and I welcome you. ASME Bite-Size is an opportunity for us to engage in some medical educational activity in small chunks. And today I've got with me Dr Paula Vickerton, who is the head of anatomy at Queen Mary University of London, Bart's medical school. And I've heard Paula talk a few times about how she's gone online with her anatomy teaching. And today she's going to talk about virtually teaching or teaching virtually anatomy. And I'm very excited to hear what she has to say. So Paula, you're going to share some slides with us, and then there's going to be plenty of time, opportunity for questions afterwards, to which I invite people who are listening and watching to enter your question into the chat bit of the Zoom meeting, and then we'll try and field those. So Paula, take it away.
Thanks, Sandra. Good evening. Okay, so I will just share my screen with you. Good evening, everybody. So as Sandra said, I'm going to be talking to you a little bit about my experiences of teaching online this semester. So obviously with COVID and the lockdown, we had to move our anatomy teaching sort of mid-semester from a lab setting to an online setting. So to start off with, because I'm going to be talking about interactive webinars, I thought it was a bit of a missed opportunity if I didn't include a little bit of interaction in my own webinar. So to start off with, I've just got a little question for you to answer on Slido. So if you've got your phones next to you, with you, or any device, if you could go onto slido.com and then put in the code bite-size, and then if you could just answer me the question, why do we teach in labs or in small groups? Why don't we teach everything in sort of lectures? What is it that you aim to get out of a lab setting that you couldn't get out of a lecture? Okay, great. So some of the themes that are coming out there, some obviously the ones that are coming out the most, sort of interaction, hands-on experience, better engagement. So I guess that's kind of the answers that I was hoping people would give me. So personally, I think one of the really big advantages of small group teaching or laboratory teaching is that you have that chance to have that interaction, that engagement with the students. Obviously also it's an opportunity to have a hands-on experience. So when we were moving our sessions online, this is something that we had to think about. So what is it that we're trying to get out of the labs, and how can we do that in an online setting? So obviously the hands-on experience we're just not going to be able to take online, but in terms of the interaction, the feedback, the engagement, that we thought we could take online. So just to give you a little bit of an overview as to how we teach anatomy at Bart. So we have a fairly large year group, so we have about 360 in first year and a similar number in second year. So we teach them anatomy in station-based classes. So we have stations that have cadaveric material or skeletons or models, and we'll have students come in groups of sort of 40 to 60, come into the labs, and they rotate around the stations. And this is their chance for a hands-on experience. It's their chance to see things in 3D, and it's their chance to interact with the tutors that we have in the labs there facilitating the sessions. So why can't we move that online? It might sound obvious to this audience, but we are really strictly governed by the human with what we can do with our cadaveric material. So we can't, for example, video all of our cadavers and then just put that up online. We can't stream a dissection because that's obviously going to be, well, we don't have consent for that, and it could be very much against the. And it's also a bit of a tricky area as to how much we can photograph the cadavers and put them online, because as soon as you put them online, you have no control with what students do with them. And also just streaming something, putting it online is a very passive experience for the students as well. So what we decided to do is we decided to deliver our anatomy through synchronous online tutorials. And we have a group of 5 of us this year, so this hasn't all been done by me, this is very much a collaborative effort. So there's 2 anatomy lectures, we have 3 teaching fellows as well. And collectively over lockdown, we delivered 266 hours of online tutorials. So over quite a short space of time, we built up quite a lot of experience. And so in this presentation, I'm going to talk a little bit about how we implemented it, a few of the problems that we encountered, and hopefully some solutions, and then the student perceptions of these tutorials as well. So how we delivered the tutorials, we used Blackboard Collaborate. We used Blackboard Collaborate because that's what our university do. Had a little look at it and it did everything that we wanted it to do, so we didn't look any further. I know there are a lot of slightly different alternative platforms, but this is the one that we used. So when you set up a Blackboard Collaborate webinar, when you go into the room, this is what you see. We created a set of PowerPoint slides, similarly to how you would do if you were going to do a lecture. So we created a set of PowerPoint slides. And once you've uploaded them onto Blackboard Collaborate, you can then, at the top of the screen, you can see there's a range of different tools. So you can draw on your slides and you can type on your slides. What you can also do is you can define what the students are able to do. So are the students able to share their audio, share their video, post chat messages, or draw on the material loaded? So initially, we thought these tutorials would be very similar to doing a tutorial in the lab. So we thought you'd kind of put up a whiteboard, you'd draw diagrams of structures, you'd ask students questions, they'd answer you those questions verbally. However, what we found is that the audio just didn't really work in terms of enhancing interactivity, because we'd ask a question, the students would be typing up their notes, they'd have to finish what they were typing, they had to think about the question, they'd had to start answering the question, then they'd had to realise that they're on mute, then they'd had to unmute their microphone and then answer the question. By that point, somebody else is talking, and we just found that audio just didn't work, and it really put off students answering questions. So we sort of changed tack a little bit, and instead of designing our slides around students answering questions verbally, we designed them around students either posting the chat or actually drawing and writing the slides themselves. So this is an example of a slide that we would put up. So put up this image and ask the students to identify different structures on it. And you'd get them to all do that all at the same time, and you'd very quickly build up this really nice picture of their sort of collective knowledge. And you could go through all of those different labels, and you could pick up where people were getting things right and any sort of common mistakes. And this is a screenshot from one of the tutorials. So it also worked quite well for slightly more open questions. So questions where you had more than one answer, and you'd ask the students to all kind of come up with different bits, and then you build up a far bigger picture of their sort of collective understanding. Now, obviously, anatomy is an incredibly three-dimensional subject. This is something that's a little bit difficult to translate into a sort of online format where you've got different images. But what we also were able to do with Blackboard Collaborate is you could just share your screen, and we could navigate over to visible body, which is a 3-dimensional anatomy program that we have access to at our university. Again, there are many different 3D anatomy programs that you can use. This is just the one that we have access to. So again, we found that quite useful for bringing the 3-dimensional aspect. In terms of video, this is something that we've talked about quite a lot at our institution in terms of students putting on their video and not putting on their video. In terms of video, I always had mine on when I was leading a tutorial, because I think it's really important. A lot of communication is non-verbal, so I think it's helpful to have your camera on. Also, it's nice, it makes it feel more personal for the students as well to be able to see somebody on their screen. In terms of the students having their camera on, even if all 12 of these students in the session had their camera on, you would only see one of them at once, and you would see them this sort of size. So when you're normally delivering a tutorial in a face-to-face situation, I think a lot of what you're saying and a lot of the level you're pitching it at is going to come from the feedback you're getting from students, whether they're looking confused or they're nodding along or they're staring distractedly out the window. You get an awful lot of feedback from your students whilst you're doing small group teaching. So this sort of lack of information took a bit of getting used to. One thing that we did to try and help get us a little bit more information about how well the students were kind of getting the topic is we put in these blank sort of question slides and say, if you've got any questions from sort of the last 10 to 15 minutes, you've got any questions, just write them on the slide. We can go back and we can address them. If you don't have any questions, draw me a smiley face. And this is the result of one of these sessions. And you can see the students got quite into this as well. And this was a really nice way to only get a bit of feedback with how happy, but also just a nice way to have one of the more informal interactions that you'd normally be having in a face-to-face situation. It also meant that the students could have a few sort of informal interactions, and which did get me thinking that that's something that students are going to miss out on a lot, because how often do you go to a lab class and only talk to the instructor? It doesn't happen. You go to classes and you talk to each other as well as talking to the instructor. One thing I'm planning to do in September is I want to add in sort of impossible questions into the tutorials and break students into breakout groups of maybe 3 students that are sort of unsupervised breakout groups, give them a question, so that they have something a little bit silly, a little bit ridiculous to talk about, and they can have a little interact with each other, and then we can bring them back as a group and go through some of the topics. So one of the sort of impossible questions come up with is, what would happen to the skull if you remove the sphenoid bone? So obviously there's not particularly a right answer. You could say that there are wrong answers, but it's not really a right answer because it's sort of an impossible scenario. But it gets the students thinking a little bit about, well, where is the sphenoid bone? What's it articulating with? What structures is it supporting? It's a way of getting them to think about the anatomy in a slightly less conventional way. On Blackboard Collaborate and on many online platforms, there's also a little polling tool, and we found this quite useful if the students were being a little bit quiet. So just pop in a question on the poll and you could see quite quickly who was awake and who wasn't awake. And again, when you do a poll, it tells you who has and who hasn't answered. Again, bearing that in mind, I thought I would see how many of you are awake. So which nerve was most at risk in that image? So radial, median, ulnar, or axillary? Again, if you go over to Slido, should now be able to see the poll. Okay, lovely. So most of you got radial. It's mid-humeral shaft fracture, so radial nerve is going to be most at risk. Your ulnar could easily be damaged as well. So in terms of getting a little bit of feedback from the students with regards to the tutorials, after we had done our sort of 2-week block with our second years, we sent them feedback survey just to ask them a few questions around the online tutorials. And it was probably a fairly biased sample that did give us responses, but of those 56 responses that we got, they all found the tutorials either extremely useful or somewhat useful, which is quite an overwhelmingly positive response. And then we also asked them what was the best thing about the tutorials. So we had that they felt like it was a one-to-one session, so it felt almost like they were just being guided through it by the tutor. But they also enjoyed the interaction. They really liked that it was a live event, not just something that they could draw on the slides, that they could see the questions of the other students as well, make mistakes, and they could learn from those mistakes as well. And again, the interactivity is coming through. In terms of what I have learned from the online tutorial, is that students behave quite differently in an online setting. The main benefit of being able to put on a live event is the interaction that you can have with the students. And we also found it really useful to do trial runs with other colleagues to kind of test out different functionalities, because we were all learning this as we went. None of us were particularly familiar with different online tools and things that we could do. So we were just learning as we went, and we were giving a lot of information to each other. So we're just sharing what had gone wrong, what had worked, and then building on it from there.
Thank you, Paula. That was great. Very imaginative. Unfortunately, I didn't get myself onto Slido in time to answer the question, and that's my excuse, and I'm sticking to it. Thank you. There is some time now for some questions, and I'm going to have a look in the chat and hope that you have got a chance for people to ask Paula some questions about her teaching, and maybe you could also share some experiences yourselves if you've been doing similar or in fact doing it differently. Whilst I'm doing that, if I sort of open up, I mean, what did you think that the students valued most about this, Paula?
I think they really valued that they had like this dedicated time that they could come on and they could be told a little bit of anatomy and they could ask any questions that they had. Mm-hmm. They could go away and do it all by themselves, but it's that being able to ask questions and get an immediate response.
Okay, good, fine, thank you. Somebody has asked me, are we recording? And it was remiss of me not to remind you that we do record our ASME bite-sized sessions. So yes, we are recording. Somebody comments, Irene Walsh, she says, great presentation, lots of interaction for students, smiley face. I'd like to know if you sent resources before and after these to the students. And could you answer that, please, Paula?
Yeah. So we put up sort of a version of the PowerPoint slides beforehand. So they had maybe more labeled diagrams on them and didn't have all of the questions that we were going to ask. But we put up the PowerPoint slides beforehand. We also had the work booklets from the labs that would have been happening. We also put those up online for the students as well. And the tutorials were very much based around those work booklets. So they could also go through those in their own time as well.
Okie dokie. Also, I will also mention that if we unfortunately don't get to your question, then we will answer them afterwards. So were the sessions recorded? So for students who weren't able to join, could they take part later? Because we found that was a really tricky issue because we had so much student interaction. There's got to be an aspect of consent there, and we were so many sessions throughout the week
that if students couldn't attend, we directed them towards another one throughout the week. And then if students consistently weren't able to attend, we said we could organise some alternative catch-up session for them that suited them. Because we had a bit more flexibility in the timetable at that point because of various things being cancelled. But in September, I think we're going to record one a week, so that we're not recording all 20 sessions that we're doing in a week. We're just going to record 1 year 1 session, 1 year 2 session, and change the group that we record every week so that it's not one group of students that's constantly being recorded. But I think university policy needs to be discussed around recording of sessions and student consent, and how do we get consent for students.
Yeah, I mean, obviously a student that's joining by watching it later, it doesn't get the opportunity to interact with your scribble board or answer the questions, do they? But I think certainly when we've been doing problem-based learning groups, there is value in asynchrony, having sessions that can be watched at different times. Yeah. Okay. So somebody called Sarah Edwards is saying, were there any disadvantages about this teaching happening this way that you felt?
Yes. So I'm quite pro sort of cadaveric teaching. I think it's really difficult to get the same aspect of reality or of 3D online. So particularly in lab settings, you think about sort of cardio teaching, we have lots of examples of hearts with heart failure, and every year the students come in, they pick them up and they can't believe how big they are or how hypertrophied they are. They can't believe it was in a person. I don't think you can get that aspect of realism.
Yes, texture. Not there. Wetness. Okay. Tell us a little bit more about the platform you used to deliver these sessions, and what advantage, you've talked about some of the tools on it. Is there anything else you'd like to say about that? And also, have you had any experience of other platforms?
Yes, so we use Blackboard Collaborate, as I said, because that's what our university sort of subscribed to. And we found it really useful. I think the thing that I really liked about it is that everybody could interact with the same slides in real time. So we did have problems with it, so it just didn't work for a couple of days.
Okay.
Everybody could access it, staff or students. So we then moved our tutorials onto MS Teams. And whilst that was good, it didn't have the same, the students couldn't interact with the slides that you had uploaded. You could put them up and you could talk through them, but they really had to be either giving you answers in the chat or switching on their mics. So sort of collaborative building up of different bits of knowledge across the slide. So it worked, but it just wasn't how we designed our sessions. So it wasn't as good for what we were trying to do. But I think as long as the session is designed around the platform that you're using, you create something just as good on another platform.
Okay. What about the poll, which I loved, and I've heard other speakers use polls as well. Is that the best way to do the poll, do you think, or have you got experience of using something else?
I think so. Again, on MS Teams, you can integrate Microsoft Forms, so you can sort of download Microsoft Forms, and then you can very quickly write little polls in the chat function. I think that's possibly slightly more user-friendly than doing them on Blackboard Collaborate. But they're relatively similar in what you're doing. Okay.
And Cheryl Vasson asks, how long was each tutorial session?
So we timed them to be 90 minutes, and we did that because that's how long the lab class would be. And we often found that actually you weren't quite done in 90 minutes if the students were really engaged. So they often went on a bit longer than that.
Yeah.
But I think, again, we had a bit more flexibility in the timetable then. In September we won't, so it'll be minutes absolute maximum, which I was quite surprised. I thought the students would flag because it's a more sort of intense way of teaching than in a lab setting.
Yes,
it didn't. They kept having questions.
There isn't too much opportunity to nod off, is there really, or wander off and do something else when you've got the interactive bits as well. Yeah, sure, good, okay. I mean, what's the bit that you enjoyed the most about delivering the teaching like this?
I think it was when you asked them to sort of, you'd ask them a question and everybody started bringing different bits of information to it, and you could see it all visually and they could all see it. I think that was really powerful, and it's not something that you would normally be able to do in a lab setting because it would be more time and you'd be trying to get students to maybe draw something together or try and build up something. So I think it really was the collaborative element that was really really nice as the sort of the educator or the facilitator of the session.
Okay, what do you think you might do differently in the autumn when we are likely to still have a lot of online teaching, Paula?
So we're planning to create more formalized sort of asynchronous resources as well. So we're making a lot of interactive e-learning packages so that students will have an asynchronous week and then they'll have a synchronous week, so that they've got something else to kind of back up the tutorials. As I said, I think we'll be recording them, and I want to start introducing some sort of hypothetical questions or impossible questions to try and get students talking to each other.
Okay, fine. I mean, that probably relates to one question from Rania Rathan, who says, is it possible to use breakout rooms when the students are in large numbers? And she or he wonders whether how difficult that is. What do you think about, did you use breakout rooms?
So we haven't really, so we did a little bit when we were kind of trying different functionalities. You can use breakout rooms. You can't be in every room, or you can't have oversight as what's happening in every room. So you can only be in one room at a time. So it depends how much you want to moderate what's going on in those rooms. But if you want to give them like a question to go away and just discuss, then it works really well, I believe. The recording doesn't record in the breakout rooms as well. So I think it's good to ask them a question, go away, discuss, bring back. I don't think it works if you want to start off with a little session, then you want everyone to break out into a little group and go through more of the content, possibly with a facilitator, and then come back, because that just won't be recorded. But I'm aware of other people that have used breakout rooms and said it's quite effective.
Yeah, I think it is something that we learn as we go along, what works and what doesn't, and some things do work better, don't they? So Irene Walsh, again, thank you for contributing, Irene. Comments, do you think students were more likely to collaborate while being in a remote situation than they would in person? Were they less inhibited? My experience personally of running a problem-based learning small group was that actually I had great difficulty getting the students to switch their screens on so that I could see their faces. I mean, I think Paula's teaching with material and therefore doesn't want to see students' faces, but what would you say, Paula, about their interaction?
So in terms of collaborating with each other, I would say in a lab setting, you'd probably get 1 or 2 students going around together. So they would be collaborating with each other quite a lot. Whereas in this setting, they were collaborating as a group of sort of 12. So I'd say that they were probably collaborating an equal amount, but with people and in a larger, people that they wouldn't have necessarily been working with, and in a larger group than they would naturally work with.
Okay.
But I agree, the PBL style is quite difficult if students won't.
Yes, I think PBL needs to, I mean, we did that very rapidly, but I think PBL needs to borrow some tips from anatomy. So, you know, doing polling and having things to annotate and having an effective whiteboard for students to write on. would suggest to me all sorts of things that we need to have to go forward. So that, you know, shared good teaching principles there. So, I mean, is there anything that you really hated about teaching anatomy online?
It's just really weird not being able to see whether people are understanding or not. So when you do silences, it's like silence, and when nobody was writing on anything, it's really difficult.
You find that you just talked over the silence. That's what I did in the PBL group.
I just sit there and say, well, we're not moving on until someone says something.
Oh, well, you're meaner than me. Yeah, I know. It is, that is a little bit tricky, isn't it? Because you lose those nuances. Maybe we'll get used to it, but maybe not. Okay. So have you worked with anybody else across another institution to deliver any of these new way of teaching? Are there any collaborations out there?
I haven't been working with anybody else, no.
No, okay. I mean, I wonder if there's anybody out there that might like to work with Paula. Now's your chance to put your hands up. Oh, there we go. So Frances Adelaide has her hand up, and there's a couple more that have got their hands up as well. Will the students be having some hands-on teaching at some point? Well, hopefully. And then there's some questions about body dissection rather than prosections. Paula, I don't know, do you want to answer those three questions? Well, one to comment just quickly.
Yeah. Yeah, we hope to be giving some hands-on teaching at some point when it is safe to get students back into the lab, but there are a lot of restrictions, a lot of things to work out there. So we're working on the online aspect because that will be needed. And then when it's a little bit clearer what the restrictions will be in September, we'll work out what is and isn't possible in terms of a lab.
Okay, thank you very much. We will pop some text into the chat for those who had already switched off, but thank you very much. And at the end of this, about how to contact us, you can go to our website, which will provide information about how to contact Paula, should you wish to know some more. I'm hoping that's okay, Paula, for you to, we haven't got any unanswered questions, but we can put you in contact with Paula should you wish to discuss this further or share some work with her, because I think this is a global issue. It isn't just something that's in the East End of London. Thank you very much, Paula. I've enjoyed listening again, and I will now know the answers to which nerve is involved for next time. For those of you who are following our ASME Bite-Size, please visit our website with the information for our next few sessions. And certainly next week, which much to my sadness was going to be when our annual scientific scholarly activity meeting was to occur in Liverpool, which has been postponed. And therefore we're putting on extra special number of sessions next week for you to make up for that. And if you go to the website, the information there is for how to register for those. So in the meantime, keep safe. Paula, is there anything else you'd like to say before we sign off?
Okay.
Thank you very much. Goodbye, everyone. Take care.